Now, joining me on the big interview tonight is a lady who's a qualified counsellor and a psychotherapist. She's also got a brand new book coming out called Coming Out of the Dark. We're going to find out all about it by talking to Anna Gray on tonight's big interview.
The first time he physically hit me was such a shock that I'm not sure I believed it were true. We had been shopping and he'd said that other men had been staring at me in a way that he didn't like, that I must have been flirting or sending sexual signals to them. I wasn't, of course. With one blow to the side of my head, my remaining trust in men was gone. A huge range of emotions coursed through my body. Disbelief came first, utter shock as the truth sank in was next. I was surprised to find that those emotions were then followed by guilt. I felt guilt, as if somehow I had caused it and it were my fault. Then came the fear. I had no real idea that he was capable of going that far, or how far he might go again. Hurt followed. I felt all my dreams of the perfect relationship slip away in the swing of his arm. Sadness, or maybe a better word is grief. I grieved the image I'd had of him, of someone who wanted to protect me from danger, not to be the one who had created it. I grieved the innocence of our relationship and of love. It was gone forever and could never be repaired.
So that's an extract from a brand new book called Coming Out of the Dark by Anna Gray, who joins me now in the studio. Anna, how are you?
I'm great, Robin. Thank you for having me.
So congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
It's out now, and I say it's picking up some great reviews already, isn't it?
Yes, it is actually. It's not launched until later this month, but I've had a few copies that I've been able to give out so far, and it seems to be getting really, really great feedback from people, so I'm delighted.
So tell us, what was it that made you want to write the book then?
Okay, so when I was younger, I experienced a lot of different mental health issues. So went through bullying in school, and it really, really deeply affected my self-esteem and self-image and self-worth. Because I didn't talk about it, bullying wasn't really spoken about an awful lot back then in the way it is today, then I just didn't let anybody know for quite a while that it was happening. And by the time that I did, there was already quite a bit of, I suppose, damage done to me. So as I then went into teenage years, it really became that I went into that sort of time of my life with a very low opinion of myself and very little faith in people in the world, and turned to different things to try and escape. I started drinking an awful lot and going out to bars very, underage. Yeah. And that really, seeing things that I shouldn't have seen at that age and reinforcing the damage that was already done. I guess then as years went by, there was different ways that my anxiety came out. So one of them would have been a thing called trichotillomania.
Right.
Which was relatively unheard of back then and is still not that well known about at the minute, but that's when your anxiety comes out by actually pulling clumps of your hair out because it settles. There's something within it when you touch your hair and you pull it, that it seems to be that it releases something within the body. And it settles the nerves and settles the anxiety.
And this is something that a lot of people could suffer from, but actually don't know what it is or why they're doing it.
Well, I didn't know at the time. I didn't have a clue. I'd never heard of it until actually years later. And it was something that was a kind of reflex, instinctual thing when I was trying to soothe myself with the anxiety. And that's what happened. And I ended up with bald patches that I hid. And, it's just like a way of anxiety to sort of manifest and come out. So also a little bit of self-harm, so I would have cut myself a little bit as well. And I was suffering. I was really suffering. And it's not that I didn't have a good family unit. I had a brilliant family unit. But I was just too afraid. I was too ashamed. Yeah. And I just hid it. So then what happened was I ended up in a relationship that was, at the start, seemed great. finally I found this relationship where I can be loved, and I'm loved, and it's wonderful. When actually it turned very quickly into control and domestic violence, right. Which again then further reinforced the feeling of not being worthy, of not being good enough. So I guess there was always something inside me that felt, I need to get out. I need something to help myself. There was still always a little tiny flicker of a flame inside me that knew there was light at the end of the tunnel somewhere. I then moved over to Scotland in the hope to, start a new life, yes. Find a job and get away from the relationship and everything that had been sort of pulling me down in Belfast. I sort of saw Belfast as a reminder. Everywhere I turned was a reminder of a bad time. So I went over there. It didn't quite work out. I ended up working, but I had no money.
You were very young still when you went to Edinburgh.
Yeah, I was 19.
Yeah.
I was sort of 19, 20, and I was still quite young. I was still carrying all of that trauma and that pain inside. I still really hadn't spoken to anybody about very much. So it was still sort of ingrained within me, and I was acting out of it. So when I found myself in that situation away from home, everybody at home had high hopes that I was going to, go over and make something of my life, and I didn't.
And what did you hope to do? Did you have plans? Did you have a career plan mapped out, or did you just go there hoping that something would just pop up? And
I would like to say that I had a plan, but I didn't.
Yeah.
I went over and I thought that something would happen when I got there. It was kind of like, let's just get out of this and go. It was much harder than I thought, and I did end up sort of not being able to survive financially. And that's when I came across lap dancing bars, and I sort of thought, okay, there was an intrigue. There was a sense of, I wonder what that's like. I wonder if it's like what you see in the films.
Yeah.
I wonder, is it as glamorous? And there was initially a kind of curiosity and an instinct and a draw towards it. There was also the aspect of, I could make more money doing this, I could survive. Yes. And I have to be really clear about something here. It wasn't for I could make loads of money. It was I could make the money to survive and
yes.
not have to suffer and worry about survival every day. Yeah. That was what was going on.
And you wouldn't have to work like every hour there is of
yeah.
the day. That was
yeah.
the big...
Yeah, it was a survival thing for me, not I want to make loads of money so that I can buy loads of glamorous things. It wasn't that. So...
And for somebody if that is so young as well, is good money for a 19-year-old, isn't
absolutely.
it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think at the end of every week, I was lucky to have £5 or £6 left.
Right.
When I was eating very little, and again, really not telling anybody where. And that's the problem. You've asked me why.
And could you have ended up on the streets at that stage?
No.
No.
Absolutely not, because I did have the option to always go home.
Yeah.
So I was lucky in that sense. I always had the option to go home. I still had a very good connection and relationship with my family in terms of if I wanted to go home, I could have. We talked all the time. I just never spoke about what was going on for me. And that's why I really desperately wanted to write a book, to show where things can lead to when you don't speak about your mental health,
yes.
when you don't talk about what's going on, when you don't let people know, and when you don't reach out. And I guess it was a deeply, deeply personal experience for me to write about all the things that I had been through, and I had all
That's
these...
probably bringing back things that you had boxed away as well and kind of put to one side.
Yeah, sort of halfway through the book I do talk about how things all changed around for me, and the work that I did through counselling, going to counselling and different alternative therapies where I did an awful lot of work on it. So it wasn't so much that there was all these boxes of untapped into trauma, but certainly there was other layers to it that writing brought together, and things clicked into place, and I sort of, oh God, right, okay, that's I never saw it in that way. So there was extra levels of healing for me, but it didn't throw me back into the throes of it all.
Yeah. So let's get back to Edinburgh. How did you then get away from Edinburgh? You ended up in this lap dancing club.
Yes, I did.
And obviously pretty horrendous experience, I would imagine.
Yes and no. It was a very good learning experience, because reflecting back on it, maybe not so much at the time, but reflecting back on it years later, I learned an awful lot about the dynamics between male and female. About when I say the word power, I don't necessarily mean control, I just mean the subtleties of someone going into a bar as a dancer and learning, well, what's the intention? What's driving you to do that? What's the motivation? And I cannot by any means speak for every single woman who does it. I can only speak for myself because I know that people do it for different reasons. And for some people, it literally is.
There's people out there doing it to get themselves through university.
Absolutely.
Their fees are so big.
It doesn't faze them, and there's no sort of negativity or negative impact on them. So I genuinely can't speak for everyone. I can only speak for my own experience and say that for me, whilst initially there was that sort of curiosity, the real driving factor was a survival, which meant that I felt that I was sacrificing my own integrity for survival. And that further, it further reduced my sense of self-esteem.
Right, okay.
If that makes sense.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So then after the lap dancing came the telephone chat lines as well you got involved in. How did that come about?
So that came about because the lap dancing, because it was so one-on-one and personal and literally in the flesh, and it felt...
Did you feel uncomfortable, or did you feel you had a power when you were doing it?
Both, strangely enough. It was strange because so I need to just explain, when part of the actual night was dancing on the stage. So you're not in contact with someone. And that was when there was a sense of a certain power of sexuality, a sense of feeling, what's the word? Able to seduce or able to entice, which was really interesting, a very, very interesting experience. But it was when it was one-on-one and it really was very close personal contact that it really, the feeling really came upon me of, I really don't like this. I don't want to be doing this, because it's that man choosing to pay me to do that. So I felt initially powerless. If I want to work here and get paid, I have to do this, whether I actually want to. It's not me choosing him. So I felt really quite powerless. And I realised quite quickly, I can't continue with this. I can't continue. So I still felt, though, that I couldn't survive by getting a day-to-day job. And by that point in time, I genuinely felt I had nothing to offer. I felt I had no skills. I'd left my degree, sort of a year and a half through. So I didn't really have, I had my A-levels and I had a few things, but I didn't really feel like I had an intellectual or academic career path. So I felt I didn't really have anything to offer. And I felt I had no skills, because everything was so eroded. So I was really rock bottom at the point where I felt like, what have I got to sell but sexuality? And it was almost like, I don't have anything left. I don't have anything to sell. What's left of me but sexuality? It's the only thing I felt I had. And I didn't want to do it on a one-on-one level. So doing it on the phone felt safer.
But was it? Because you must have had some really strange, horrible people on that phone.
Yes, actually more so than in person in a lap dancing bar, because they didn't have a face and they didn't have to use a name and they could say pretty much whatever they wanted. Now, obviously there were things that if they talked about, I had to end the call immediately and report them. That never happened. Luckily that never happened, but still there were things that were extremely uncomfortable. So in one way it was safer because there was no perceived physical risk, but on another way it was actually even more detrimental.
And of course, as well as those people, the weird people who make the calls, you must just get the lonely people
I did.
who aren't interested really in talking sex.
Yeah.
They just want to phone up because they know they're going to have a chat with somebody and you have to talk to them.
Yes, and those were the calls I loved.
Yeah.
Because I also was lonely, you know.
Yeah.
It's funny, we sort of mirrored each other, those types of calls, because I also was sitting there lonely, just wanting to chat to somebody and not about sex.
Yeah.
And I had one lady in particular that I've written about in the book, and she had called, and the call had come through by mistake.
This was kind of the turning point for you, wasn't it? Yes.
It certainly was one of the turning points. The company that I worked for had 2 separate phone lines, and they had one which was like a spiritual tarot card reading line, and one was the sort of sex chat line.
Yeah.
And whatever way her call was routed, she came through to me by mistake.
Yeah.
And it just, you know, we just talked, I think, for about an hour, maybe more. It was about 6 o'clock in the morning, and she just wanted to talk. And we ended up, I mean, not doing cards, but we ended up she was talking about her problems, and I was able to relate to a lot of what she was talking about. And suddenly the penny dropped with me. I thought, wow, okay, if I can share in one way or another the things that I've been through, the pain that I've went through, and the things that will or will come to help me, that's what I've got.
Yeah.
That's what I've got. I might not have the qualifications yet, and I didn't at that stage. I do now, but I didn't. I thought that's what I've been missing. That's what I can do instead of this.
Yeah.
So it just clicked into place at that point in time.
So how did you then eventually get yourself away from Edinburgh and back to Belfast then?
I just decided, that's it. I'm going back. And I just thought, that's it. Yeah.
And did you come back as a completely different person?
No.
No.
No, I didn't. On some levels, yes, because I knew I wasn't going to go back to sort of selling things,
Yes, yeah.
selling parts of myself in that way. But I still had a very, very long way to go. I still had to go through major counselling and healing through the alternative sense for myself. I knew that I would need both. Which I did over the years. I wanted to become qualified, and I wanted to then use my experiences to help other people.
And you've done that. You become a qualified counsellor,
Yes.
qualified psychotherapist as
Yes.
well. And I suppose what makes you so good at your job today is the fact that you've went through this crazy life and these experiences, and now you can turn that into helping other people.
Yeah, I believe so. I believe that because I have sat in the dark and really, really explored what that was all about, and really spent years delving into it all, not just in the counselling sense of talking therapies, which is so valuable, but also wanted to explore, well, what's this alternative side of things all about, and could that help me, and could I use that in my future work?
The thing that I like about your book, and the thing that makes your book different from other people's book, is when you get to the end of a chapter, it doesn't just finish about your life. You put a little bit in the end, what you've learnt, and little bits for where other people can get help as well, don't you?
Well, when I decided that I wanted to do the book, and I met up with my editor from Book Hub Publishing, who's published the book, he said to me at the very first meeting, I sort of went into the meeting, and this is funny, I sort of went into the meeting honestly thinking, I wonder if I could keep this anonymous. I wonder if I could write this and not have to really talk about myself, but talk about experiences, because it was really scary, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, you know, what are people going to think? There's a lot of people who know me who don't know any of that. Well, they know it now, you know. But initially, it's sort of thinking that, you know, that's quite, it takes
and especially
a
your
lot of
family
courage.
as well, as you hid it from them for so long as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, they knew everything before
of course.
I decided to write it, because I wouldn't have sprung that kind of stuff on them. But it's still scary. It still takes courage to come out and talk, you know, especially when you're a qualified counsellor and you have a sort of professional reputation, and you think, okay, is it okay to come out and talk about all of these things? And I was really in a sort of quandary, sort of thinking, how am I going to do this? And then he sat down with me and he says, look, you either jump into this with 2 feet or you don't. And I don't mean he was forcing me to write anything that I didn't want to, but he said, anything that you feel is going to help others, don't hold back. Don't hold back on it. You know, have courage, because what helps people relate to you and what really inspires people is knowing that you've been through something yourself. Yeah. You're not sitting on a perch telling people how it should be done and sharing nothing of yourself. If you really share yourself, in fact, he said, if you bleed onto a page with your own experience, he said that's what's going to really actually touch people. And he was right. Yeah. He was right, and it took a lot of courage for me to do it, but he was right. And he also said, look, this book has to be bigger than you. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? And he said, you can't just write a story about yourself. Like, will you hear what happened to me? Yeah. He said, you've got to make it about issues that people might be going through themselves. But you've got to branch it out and say, well, here's what helped me, here's what might help you. Why don't you look at this or try this, or it might help. He said, that way, it's not just about you, it's about everyone who has either been through something similar or who knows somebody who maybe is or was or has or...
And there will be people watching this program right now who are going through the things that have happened to you throughout your life. So what would you say to them?
Yeah. I would always say that there is help, there is a way out. There are things on offer that can genuinely start to peel away the layers. I describe it like an onion, like it doesn't just happen overnight. It's layers upon layers. But there are organisations and agencies and people and family and friends and alternative things that really can help. And it's what stopped me for years was the fear of judgment, the fear of condemnation, the fear of what people might think or what I might look like, and to be honest, the fear of actually admitting to myself how far down the path into the dark I had gone. So actually making that first step to speak up and say, I'm not okay. Mm-hmm. I'm not okay. You may not be able to talk about everything straight away, but to speak up and say, I'm not okay and I need help. The power that's in that and the burden that it takes off the shoulders is indescribable. Yeah. So just speak up.
Are you thinking about a follow-up book already?
Yes. Yes, it wouldn't be like me to think ahead. Yes. When I get energetic about something, it really, I get very excited. So yes, I have been talking about doing another book. What I would like to make it is more of a workbook. So it wouldn't be a personal experience or anything that I would be sharing of mine. I think I've done quite enough of that. It would be more in terms of a workbook. So it would include exercises, writing exercises, sort of journaling for people who maybe wanted to explore, well, what are my deep fears about speaking up about something? What are my deep beliefs about my relationships in my life? What I really believe about, am I lovable? So it's for people to really write, because writing, the one thing I will say about the experience of writing a book is that when you write something and you read back, you get very, very surprised about what it is that you're actually saying and what you think. You go, did I really feel that way? So I feel like if there's some kind of journaling experience that people can have within a workbook or a self-help book, then it could be a profoundly cathartic experience for self-awareness and self-growth. So that's what I'm aiming for.
And attend. Anna, thank you for being so open and honest on the show.
Thanks.
And the very best of luck with the book.
Thank you very much, Robin.
Thank you.
Okay. So during my early 30s, I was working intensely on my own development and skills, and found that I was growing, feeling really content within myself, happy to be alive and excited about the future. Looking back, I can see that period of time as a major turning point for me in how I felt about myself. I genuinely began to love being in my own skin, and I really liked who I was becoming, and I felt I was who I was always meant to be. Gone were the days and nights of emotional pain, guilt, regret, self-doubt and the like. I felt so good. as if I was being nourished and that I had something to give back to the world, something to contribute. When I was 35, I decided that I wanted to run some support and empowerment groups for women. I was reflecting back on all the things that had helped me to overcome my difficult experiences and realised just how much a women's group would have added to my healing journey at the time. I knew if I had been in a group with like-minded women, then I would have gathered even more support, learning and growth, and I wanted to provide that for other women now that I felt I was in a totally different place within myself.